Hello and welcome back to Read Becca for a review. Today I wanted to talk to you about A Slice of Mars. This will certainly be on my favorites of the year, so I just wanted to talk about it a little bit more. A Slice of Mars is not at all what I expected it was going to be. It is certainly a science fiction novel, that's obvious, but it's much more a human story that I think could appeal much more widely. We're following a duo, San and Het, as they're trying to start a pizzeria on Mars and trying to figure out how to do what is viewed as something kind of old-fashioned in a new and high-tech way in their time, which is the far future. This is not the story of day-to-day operations of that restaurant, though, which is kind of what I was expecting. However, it is over 500 pages, so I kind of was wondering how we were going to get to over 500 pages of just that. However, this is actually much more akin to season 2 of The Bear, more about the difficulties of getting that restaurant running than the actual operations. If you liked that show about restaurateuring, it's much more like that, but without the anxiety. This does have moments of drama, but it never gets anything close to that. As we're following San and Het at the opening of the story, they're really just recruiting people, very much technologists. As I said, they're looking at how we can do this in kind of a technologically savvy way with what we have. And that means recruiting someone who is specialized in bioengineering to bioengineer the pizzas, someone in robotics to operate the layout of their building, things they can do with data science to market. All of these aspects are very STEM heavy, so this might not be a cozy book necessarily, but it's certainly comfort reading if you are a STEM nerd. It's also quite world building focused and very world building heavy, but it's woven in so seamlessly that this is not giving you info dumps throughout. There's a very smart choice made to introduce an Earthling character, Diego, who has just arrived and is doing a research thesis, effectively, on Mars. He's not at all familiar, other than as an outsider, with their culture, with how their world operates, and there is some strong tension and divides between the Earth and Mars. And we see why the two worlds are so different through his eyes and through these Martians teaching him about why their worlds are so different. You see, there is in the background of this world, long generations history, there was a revolution. To me, this has to have a strong Ursula K. Le Guin influence, I think, because The Dispossessed features two planets who have been through kind of similar revolution and separation to what we're seeing here with Earth and Mars. Earth was this very strong corporatist overlord to Mars, and they very much wanted to control how people could exist on Mars. And there was a revolution, and the Martians sort of freed themselves from this overpowering influence. And they became a very collectivist society. So everything is completely different. And we are seeing that not through the major things that have changed, more so through the day-to-day living. Things like walking through a grocery store and how Diego is processing that as an Earthling versus the Martians who are kind of have never really existed outside of these world norms, are having to explain to him what it's like to exist in a society where the consumer has the power, where you're trying to be reached by marketing for the reasons that you are a good candidate to want something and buy it, rather than because a corporation has all of the power and simply wants to sell the maximum. So there are complete differences laid out there in terms of every aspect of how their lives work. And it is a very high-tech society. So we also have things like a feed that you're constantly connected to and chats, and those are delivered in really innovative ways through the text. So you can sort of see people chatting with one another in the background as they're having personal conversations one-on-one, and then having group conversations alongside. It's really, really cool. So I love those aspects and how the world building is just really natural. It doesn't feel like it's separate from the story. It's part of delivering the story to you. As I said, though, this is very much a human story in that we are following this crew going from strangers to very close-knit, and we're seeing them disagree with how they want this business to run or what they think is right for this business, and work through those conflicts. There are some bigger conflicts as well. There are some kind of world level stakes conflicts that happen. So everything is not all low stakes. It's not all easy. And yet we see them continue to band together and be supportive of each other, even when they disagree, and even when there are hardships facing them that are pretty major. They have so many differences because each of these characters is very distinct. The ways that they identify and their backgrounds, there's a pretty significant element to the world building that more or less amounts to reincarnation from a scientific or technological methodology. It's something like that. But these people go through something where death doesn't really exist anymore. And what does that mean if you carry forward trauma and baggage through your life, through your relationships? And that's explored in an interesting way to do with individual identity and how people continue or don't continue their relationships through that process. So I think that created a lot of nuance to this and uniqueness to the book that I have not really seen before, even in science fiction. I also love that for a book that's very focused on interpersonal relationships and connection, it doesn't really ever go into a major subplot of romance. This is much more focused on the working and personal platonic relationships. There's so much attention to detail with the background elements as well, just little things that make it special about how the pizzas are laid out, or the fact that there's a very oversized cat who is kind of a side character almost. She's very prominent for sure. There are all these little touches that I think make the reader connect very significantly with this story. The fact that there is a major focus on characterization and world building, I think, is the right focus. There's not a ton of plot or action, I would say, to this. There's some, but you also, going into a 500-page book, don't want it to be plotting or completely plotless for the most part, and I don't think it is. For me, it's very easy to read and turn pages just because the characters and learning about this world are so compulsive. So I didn't find it slow or meandering at all, or at least not in ways that weren't readily consumable. And I think the prose, in part, services that really well. It's not excessively flowery or dense. It's also not quite simple. I would say it's efficient. It's definitely kind of window pane prose. It's getting across the message in a clear way. And I think that's great for making a longer book really easy to read. A Slice of Mars was a huge hit for me. It's so innovative in what it's trying to do and has such great messaging behind everything that it delivers. It's telling us a story of how we're all different and how we should care enough to continue communicating and working through those differences. So if that sounds at all appealing to you, you should definitely check out A Slice of Mars. Thanks so much for watching.